Hello, wonderful friends. It's Rachel Archelaus here. Thank you for coming. Today, I want to talk about the difference between making an emotional decision and an intuitive decision. I think those get balled up into the same pocket sometimes, and they certainly can be the same thing. Like, you can be emotionally wanting the thing that is intuitively aligned. But for me, sometimes they're different. So I wanted to talk about how I tell the difference between when I want something emotionally and intuitively, and why I always choose the intuitive answer over the emotional answer. So there have been a lot of instances in my life where I've been talking to someone or watching something or just seeing something out in the world and wanted it, right? Like, whether it's a beach house or a vacation or to, be friends with someone or to purchase a program or a book, there's a lot of things that we encounter every day, and oftentimes that will spark a desire. And that's what I would call an emotional decision, an emotional desire. Like, you see it, or someone tells you about it, you want it, right? You have a response to it. And I found that when I started checking in with myself and asking my higher self using my yes-no technique, which I'm sure a lot of other people use, it's not just mine, but I just ask my higher self, is this the most beneficial thing for me right now? That's what I do. Is this the most beneficial thing for me right now? And I will get a yes or no answer from that. And it will come in the form of a feeling inside my body. A yes feels open. It feels expansive. It feels like my shoulders go back a little bit. There's room in my chest. A no is a contracting feeling. It's like, we go in, it's a little denser. It's, shoulders moving forward. And they're very distinct. Very occasionally, I'll get a neutral, so I'll get no answer. I will link my yes-no technique video below and in this eye, wherever it is, so you can watch that if you aren't familiar. So that's what I do to check my feelings. So I'll have a feeling, and sometimes they don't match up. Sometimes I want something emotionally that is a no intuitively. And I thought that was really interesting because a lot of times you'll hear, follow your excitement, right? Follow the energy. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. But I will always be more inclined to follow my intuition in that feeling, that yes, than just my emotional feeling, because I am human. Like, I have a lot of beliefs and societal junk kind of floating around in me that I don't necessarily want to perpetuate. So I have momentum in areas that I would rather not continue, right? So there's still a part of me that is a people pleaser. There's still a part of me that seeks success in a way that isn't necessarily because that's what I want, it's just because that's what society tells us to have. I don't deliberately have that, but it's just a product of being alive on this planet and having that modeled to me every day. And so I find that sometimes that yes, that emotional response, like, oh, I want that and that and that, and yes, that sounds good to me, that's often tied to that older momentum that I wouldn't really want to add to if I have a choice. And so I find that when I check in with my higher self, I remove myself from the momentum. I remove myself from the beliefs and the societal pressures and stuff. And I really am able to check in with who I am now and who I want to be. And in Abraham speak, what's in my vortex. And so it just gives me that little buffer so that I'm consciously evolving and consciously choosing, not just perpetuating momentum. I'm in business with myself, and sometimes I seek out mentors or contractors or, people who can help me. And I'm often in love with what they're saying and promising. And, if I'm on a webinar about maybe buying somebody's product or service, they are going to relay that information to me in the way that makes them look the best, right? So I often get swept up in it too. I'm like, yes, that sounds amazing. I would love that. And it's only when I check in with my higher self that I'm able to know if that is exactly right for me right now. So I definitely think there's a difference between emotional desires and intuitive alignment. So it can happen the opposite way too, where you have a negative emotional response, but your intuition is all a go. This happened to me very strongly when I went to buy my RV, Gertie. As I was there, having the appointment to see it, driving in it, there was a song in my head that just said, no, 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 no. I was so afraid. It was way bigger than I thought it would be. It was like so high off the ground. It was 10 feet tall. I'm a really short person, 5'2", so it was twice as tall as me. I'd never driven anything like that before. It was way more difficult to drive than a U-Haul, which I have driven. The steering was super loose, so you could go like this and then still be going straight down the road. It was old. I mean, there were so many things about it that I was terrified about. And even driving it myself with a mechanic in the car, it was completely frightening. And I was there alone, and just, it was the first RV that I looked at. So I was all a no in my head. It was just repeating, no, 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 no. After our test drive, I was in the passenger seat. The owner was driving us back to her house. I closed my eyes. I checked in. I did my yes-no technique, and it was such a big yes. And I tell you that because a lot of times, again, we have momentum that is wanting to carry us in a certain direction. Some people would say it's your ego, right? Your ego trying to keep you small. But there's no force other than momentum that is maybe trying to keep you going on a certain path. Like there's no entity or consciousness that's trying to keep you from what you're desiring. It's just momentum, plain and simple. There's no meaning to it. And so the momentum was not owning an RV, was not going and traveling in this vehicle alone, was not driving across the country by myself. So all the momentum was of not doing it, which is where a lot of that fear came from. But I luckily had been so interested in doing this for such a long time that when it came time for me to actually buy, when it was ready to buy, when I had the money, I found the ad. I was the first person to see this RV, and I bought it. It was the first one I'd ever looked at. And so everything was lined up as soon as I was ready. And it was a yes. And it was amazing. Like I bought it, I paid for it, I took it home a couple days later, and it was definitely scary at first. I mean, it was a huge departure from what I was driving before, which was like a sports car. But I was excited. I did go on many, many road trips across the country with it. And eventually I sold it for about double what I paid for it. And so the whole thing was very aligned. That's not to say that it didn't break down a bunch of times, because it did, but that wasn't her fault, and it didn't mean that I made a bad purchase. So I just wanted to share that too. Like there can be a lot of times where you want something, you're obviously interested in it, it's right in front of you, whether it's a book or a course or a person or an RV, and that emotional pull against it is really strong. But that doesn't mean intuitively it's not the right decision, right? So I guess the whole moral of this story, both the yes and the no, is momentum is going to try to make the decision for you, but if you can pull back a little bit and deliberately ask your intuition, you will get the right answer for you. So be deliberate, ask your intuition, and you'll, in my view, always come out ahead. Super love, everybody, and I'll talk to you soon.